Welcome back. 4 minutes past 9 Central African time. And we're going to be switching gears now to a very, very important conversation. South Africa is observing Child Protection Week. But behind the awareness campaigns, school visits, and public pledges lies a very, very deeply troubling reality. Every day, children across the country face abuse, they face neglect, violence, and all kinds of exploitation, and often at the hands of those entrusted with their care, from physical and sexual abuse to online exploitation that we're seeing gaining traction lately, bullying, this abandonment, and child protection organizations are warning that far too many children remain unsafe in their homes, in their schools, and communities. I was looking at the recent crime statistics, and they continue to also paint a very, very disturbing picture. That thousands of children. Who are reported as victims of sexual offenses. I mean, you can switch on the TV now. There's probably a court case that's ongoing, and a child has been brutalized and sodomized in very, very horrific ways. And it paints a very worrying picture while we observe Child Protection Week, which serves as an important reminder of our collective responsibility towards our children. I think it also forces us, or at least should be forcing us, to confront a very, very difficult question. Are we doing enough to protect South Africa's children, especially now with poverty and unemployment and substance abuse and just general family structure breakdown seeming to continue at a rate that's very, very unprecedented? I think it places an enormous pressure on communities and households to do just a bit more to protect the children of South Africa. And we're going to be having that conversation about why it seems like South Africa is failing its children, and to help us unpack and answer some of those difficult questions and the challenges that children are facing today. We're joined by the Director of Programs at Save the Children South Africa, Briede. Megan, good morning and welcome to News and Views.
Morning. Thank you for having us on your show.
No, the pleasure is all ours. And I want us to jump right into it, Megan. South Africa is marking Child Protection Week. But what is the current state of child protection in South Africa from your perspective? What trends are you seeing? What aspects are concerning that all of us need to be looking at?
Well, I think that, children in our country remain at constant threat. We are not seeing a decline in child abuse, neglect, and exploitation of children. And as the social environment in which they're living continues to have challenges such as poverty, we continue to see children's risk growing, and particularly incidents of sexual abuse are very high. We're seeing a lot of cases of statutory rape, so very early pregnancies in young children, and that's an alarming concern for us.
And above, all of those, I think every year we hear about these alarming stats when it comes to
Mhm.
violence against children. From your perspective, what concerns you the most about the trends we are seeing and the various violations that children are subjected to in this country?
I think the greatest concern is that we're not seeing it reduce.
Mm,
We're seeing a persistent problem, and I think that part of the challenge is that we're not prioritizing children in our country. So when it even comes to budgets, for example, from municipal level upwards, children are not the question at the top of people's minds when we're budgeting. It's about maybe things like infrastructure. And yes, those are important. But if our children are not safe and are not growing up safe, then we're not creating adults that are going to be able to effectively run our country.
And many of these, child abuses that you mentioned, the most concerning aspect, at least for me, is the fact that they happen within homes and in trusted environments. Why is it so often so difficult to identify and report abuse in this case? And also, why is that the general norm that children are abused by people that they know and people that should be protecting them?
Yeah. Well, child abuse and particularly sexual abuse is very complex, and it takes a grooming process to get a young person to basically, um, s- in a way, agree. I don't know if agree is a really good word, but allow it to kind of
Mm,
happen. You need to convince them. You need to make sure that they feel this is okay, or I can't tell the secret. And very often that takes a relationship to build, and that's why we see it within the home. The greatest challenge is that these are not the cases that are easily reported, because very often the perpetrator could be a breadwinner, somebody the family is dependent on. And if that person gets removed from the family, then the whole family unit isn't going to cope when it comes to financial situations. So we see children in a way being sacrificed
mm.
for the overall well-being within that family unit.
And do you think enough is being done? I think number one, to educate children on what steps they can take if they feel like they're being abused. It doesn't matter whether it's outside or at home.
Mm,
Because I remember when I was still in school, there were so many programs, whether it's in life orientation or the childline programs where you be taught about the
mm,
childline hotline and you'd sing it out loud.
mm.
Are we still doing that where children are educated and they are told where to go when they feel abused and they don't feel safe?
Absolutely. I think there is a lot of awareness raising. We do, just as the NGO sector, do a lot of, talks and engagements with young people. I think where the problem stands is if you do report and you don't get a response. So the
Mm,
actual response system is a problem, then you just withdraw, and your chances of ever disclosing again is exceptionally slow. So that is I think one of our biggest challenges is, if I report, will I actually get the help that I need, or will I have just exposed myself
mm,
and actually made the situation worse? So our response system is part of the challenge, and we're seeing, particularly in rural communities for children, you might go and do the talk at a school, but a police station, for example, would be an hour's walk. What
mm,
is the chance that the child's going to get there? And if adults don't take a report seriously, you know, um, and think, well, the child's making it up or something, that's the problem. We need to
mm,
hear the voices of children. You know,
mm, mm,
that's the
mm,
most important thing. We need to give them a voice and make them feel that as adults, we will listen when we talk. It won't just be, don't, that couldn't really be. I mean, that's your dad, that's your uncle, that couldn't be, you know.
mm.
Um, Actually listen to what they say.
And I think you're touching on what's going to become my next question, because on paper South Africa has really strong laws that are placed to protect children, but it looks like the implementation of those laws remains the biggest challenge. What are some of the gaps that you guys say the children have noticed in the child protection system? I was having a conversation with a social worker yesterday, and she was telling me about how there's essentially no social workers, especially in public schools, and there's about 18,000 unemployed social workers
Mm,
that are in need of jobs, but they're not hired. What are some of the other gaps that you've noticed within the
mm.
child protection system that maybe also exacerbate the challenges that children face in the country?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because our law is great. To be honest,
Mm,
we've got a really good piece of legislation. Um, but we don't implement it. And it starts at the very beginning. It starts with those social workers. You're 100% right. And that links to my question of budgets. So we
mm,
invested a lot of money to give bursaries and build our social work capacity in this country, but then we didn't invest in actually budgeting for their jobs. um, so that they could actually be there for children in those schools, as a first point of call. So that's our first challenge within the country. The second, of course, then moves over to our actual justice system. Um, because delays in taking reports or getting medical examinations just means that we're unable to build sound and strong cases. So cases fall apart in court, and perpetrators are back in communities, and children are left vulnerable and also emotionally traumatized. Secondary trauma is a really big challenge. We also face the challenge that within our more traditional communities, we have systems where people believe they can resolve the problem on their own.
mm,
Compensation is paid within the family, and then that's okay. But it's not okay, because your child, you might have feel you've resolved it and there's compensation, but that perpetrator's going to do it again and do it to somebody else's child. So we never
mm.
ever stop the cycle when we act in that way.
Mm, Very, very true. Very true. And I think that's one we need
Mm,
to talk about, especially in black communities. I think it's a conversation that needs a lot of having the fact that you can't
mhm,
a crime is a crime. You can't sit in the living room and say, Uncle so and so, you did this,
mm,
apologize, or pay this amount of money. That's definitely wrong. Another
mm,
thing that I noticed over the years, and headlines have been coming out, is children now abusing other children, whether it's sexually or bullying. I think you'd see even some videos trending online where is children, kids becoming quite
mhm.
horrible to other kids. What does this stem from, and why are we seeing more of it?
Well, I think, we have cycles of abuse. If you experience or witness bullying and violence within your own family, this is your role model. This is what you know, and then you perpetrate it. You then carry that forward into your everyday life. And I always like to say that to people, even as adults, we don't realize that something as small as being in a restaurant and being rude
Mm,
to a waiter, when because you are the person sitting there with power, is demonstrating to your children bullying behavior. Then when they go to school and do the very same thing to somebody who they believe doesn't have power, um, we're shocked. We're shocked and horrified. So even from our smallest actions as adults, children are watching and children are mimicking those behaviors. Um, and that's our challenge. We're in a cycle of abuse. The children who were abused are now the parents. So what did they learn about how do I engage, love, unconditionally, and nurture and care for my child if I never experienced that?
mm, mm. Lastly, before I let you go, as you know, we're observing Child Protection Week. What would you say is the most critical message, for parents, for the South African society at large at this current moment, to make sure that we continue to protect our children, and we fill those gaps, those shortcomings, because as you mentioned, this is the next generation of South Africans, and one can
Mm,
only imagine this goes unabated, what our country is going to look like 20, 30, 40 years from now, where you essentially have damaged adults that are, roaming on streets.
yeah. I think very importantly is communicate with our children. So make sure we have open channels, and it's not us telling our children about the bad things in life, but
Mm,
open communication where we empower them and give them a voice and listen to what they're actually saying. And that has a lot of power, because if somebody tries to do something to me, I feel like I've got a voice, and I feel like the adults around me will hear me. Um, and that's one of our most powerful ways of preventing our children from falling into the traps of being abused, and harmed.
there we go, Megan, Director of Programs at Save the Children South Africa. Thank you so much for giving us your
Thank you
time.
very much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Child Protection Week. Megan Briede, Director of Programs at Save the Children SA, helping us understand the realities facing children across South Africa and the urgent interventions that are needed to ensure that every child grows up safe, protected, and able to reach their full potential. Hey, what conversations are you having with your children about, you know, abuse, state of affairs in the country, whether it's about crime, I mean, social media, and the rise of pornography, and all sorts of unethical things that they might encounter? What are you telling your kids um, about handling them? Do you feel you've created a safe space, for you and your children to sit down and for them to be comfortable enough to talk to you about literally anything? Hmm? It'd be a really interesting conversation. Give us a call, 011-680-0355 or 061-766-0355. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.